Welcome back to the still terribly named Okay Not Okay podcast. I am the SportsZu, and today we are betting Survivor Series War Games. And yes, you have come to the best betting podcast in the whole country. So here we are. Let's get to it first with our recap of Crown Jewel. Now, I did have a separate video talking all about Crown Jewel. Even though our record wasn't quite as good as usual, it still was a profitable day. So go back and check out that video for more in-depth detail on those matches. But let's do the quick recap here, of course, if you missed that one. So we were 4-2 in picks to win, but only 3-3 in picks to bet, as we did miss Big Bronson Reed losing at -175, and we also missed the OG Bloodline. They lost at +400. Our split bet, we did pick Jade and Bianca to win at -1500, but we decided that we would bet Lash and Jakara at +900. Obviously, that pick didn't quite work out for us. However, it was a profitable day because we were correct on two big underdogs with Liv Morgan at +150 and Cody Rhodes at +300, both of your Crown Jewel champions. So there were no props at Crown Jewel, and there are no props again here. So our overall record is 35-8 for picks to win and 31-12 for picks to bet. And for props, we are at 16-4. Obviously, still a pretty good record overall, despite a few more losses than usual. So with that, we also like to go next to the history of the PLE to see if we can gain any insight on that. And of course, Survivor Series is one of the big four PLEs in WWE, and this will be the 38th annual Survivor Series. Wow, pretty incredible that we've had this many of them. But more importantly for our purposes is that this is the third Survivor Series War Games on the main roster, so we'll specifically look at those first. Now, we'll start with the title matches. In each of the previous two War Games PLEs, we had two title matches, and there was one total title change when Austin Theory somehow managed to recuperate what he lost by failing to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase on the US title on Seth Rollins. But he found the way to win and defeated both Rollins and Bobby Lashley in a triple threat match. That's the only time that the title has changed hands at Survivor Series the last 2 years. The other three, the champions retained. Now in this particular instance, I'm not so sure that we really can take anything away from that, because we do have Saturday night's main event coming up in just a couple of weeks. And then the Raw premiere on Netflix, I'm sure that one will also be getting the PLE type treatment. And of course, we still have that Money in the Bank briefcase floating around here, so we'll get to that in the women's match as well. And speaking of War Games matches, we've of course had two of them each year for each of the past 2 years, and that will be the case again this year. But War Games in WWE goes back to 2017, with NXT holding the War Games matches from 2017 through 2021. So in total, there have been 12 WWE War Games matches, with 8 of them on NXT. And in those 12 matches, the face team has won 8 of the 12 matches. And then specifically on the main roster, the faces are 3-1 in War Games matches, with the Bloodline being the only heel team to win a War Games match so far. And there's one other statistic we want to talk about for War Games matches, but we'll wait and bring that up a little bit later when we get to it. So with that, let's get into it with the 3 title matches, and we will start off with the World Heavyweight Championship match between Gunther at -5,000, which is a 98.04% implied probability, against Damian Priest at +1200 for a 7.69% implied probability. Now, I have to say props to the WWE writers and Damian Priest himself for really having him put in his best mic work of his WWE career and making it very believable that he could defeat this now losing confidence Gunther, which we probably would not have ever expected. Now, of course, I think at the end of the day, no one is actually believing it based on that 98% implied probability of him winning. So I think that's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Gunther's gonna win this one, but I guess I'll note still that I think this is a ruse by Gunther and he hasn't actually lost that confidence, so he'll end up trying to show that throughout the match, but at the end of the day, he'll get that win and be as confident as ever. Now, alternatively, other than his loss to Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel, Gunther had 3 blemishes on his record in 2024, and he has already gotten revenge on 2 of those, first by defeating Randy Orton when Orton had originally not had his second shoulder on the mat at King of the Ring. But then also, of course, he lost the IC title to Sami Zayn, and of course, he got the win back on that one on Monday Night Raw. And this, of course, will be his 3rd chance to do this because even though he won the World Heavyweight Championship over Damian Priest at SummerSlam, it was Finn Balor who interfered to allow Gunther to get that win. So it just makes sense in either angle that Gunther would win there. And on top of that, on Monday Night Raw, you saw Damian Priest put Gunther through the announce table with a razor's edge. And in fact, Priest has won every interaction every single week during this feud, and we never like to see that because it's just not going to keep going in that direction. So of course, that makes it an easy pick to bet and to win Gunther at minus 5,000. Up second, it's the Intercontinental title with Braun Breaker being a minus 900 favorite for a 90% implied probability to win. Sheamus up second plus 516.67%, and Ludwig Kaiser is third plus 1,000 for a 9.09% implied probability. And of course, every month we say the traditional wisdom in a triple threat match is that the champion retains. So is there any reason to go against that here? Well, let's start with the champ himself. Well, Braun Breaker had a very short first reign as IC champion with just 1 successful title defense over Sami Zayn, and then he lost the title to Jey Uso. Now, of course, he got it back in his rematch, but again, he only has 1 successful title defense again. For WWE to do that exact same thing the second time in just a matter of months would really be a strange decision by the WWE. Now, back a few years ago, Sasha Banks had somewhat of a similar path where she seemed to be able to win titles without any problem, but then she would go right back and lose in the very first title defense. This would kind of start something similar for Breaker if that were to happen here, and we don't really need to see that, so it really makes sense for Breaker to retain here. Now for Sheamus, the WWE has been making a big deal about him winning the IC title and becoming a Grand Slam champion. Like, that is the only thing that matters for Sheamus. Now this is a Big 4 PLE, so it is possible that that could happen here, but to have Sheamus win this in a triple threat match when he doesn't even have to pin the champion after all this time, that just doesn't feel like the right thing to do. At this point, it almost feels like it has to happen at WrestleMania, and while that may not actually be true, he could certainly just win it at the Royal Rumble instead. And lastly, Ludwig Kaiser. Sure, he's done some nice things on the main roster, but he keeps losing matches over and over again. So it would really be hard to make him immediately win the IC title in this kind of match, including losing to both of his other competitors here. So it doesn't make a lot of sense just to have him go and win here. Obviously, anything can happen in a triple threat and he could steal it, but I don't think so. On top of that, we have gotten some teases of Imperium breaking up, which I certainly think is on the table, but if that were to happen, well, Kaiser would have to keep losing for Gunther to want to get rid of him. So for him to win and then to have them break up, that doesn't make any sense. Now, of course, the very remote possibility exists for a power change in Imperium. Kaiser wins the IC title, Gunther loses the World Heavyweight Championship, and then Kaiser is the leader over Gunther. That would be kind of cool, actually, with Gunther losing all of his confidence, but yeah, that's just not gonna happen right now. So at the end of the day, I think this culminates a very long on and off again feud amongst all 3 members, usually with one-on-one matches, and then this is just kind of the final blow off. Braun Breaker retains. He's our pick to bet and to win at minus 900. Our third championship match, which is LA Knight for the US title at minus 165, which is a 62.26% implied probability, while Shinsuke Nakamura is at plus 125 for a 44.44% implied probability. So right here we have to get to our spoiler alert, and if you don't want spoiled, well, come back and watch this after you watch tonight's SmackDown. So in tonight's SmackDown, you will see Shinsuke Nakamura have his first televised match back on the main roster in quite some time, and he will defeat Andrade, which I feel is kind of a bummer in itself, but that's not today's problem. But at the end of the match, LA Knight will try to get some revenge from the last 2 weeks, but Nakamura will yet again get the best of him, with Nakamura misting him right in the face to get the upper hand yet again. So that will mean he will have won all 3 conflicts between them over the last 3 SmackDowns. So of course, as things go, just like Damian Priest, we usually go the opposite direction when one person is being too dominant, and particularly in that very last episode before the PLE. And also in LA Knight's favor, well, he has been the true workhorse of the men's division on SmackDown for 2 years. He led the division with 36 matches in 2023, and he's leading yet again with 26 more televised matches this year. And his reign has just been too good. He's been knocking out every single up-and-comer on his way to maintaining that title since he got it at SummerSlam. And since he is a little bit older to getting that first title, it just makes sense that they're not going to take this away from him just this quickly. Now, if you can think back a few years with John Cena having the US Open challenges, well, Knight has done something similar, not every single week, but fairly often at least. And during Cena's reign, the announcers brought up over and over again how having these matches every single week would eventually wear Cena out and he would lose because of it. And of course, that is indeed what happened, but they haven't been doing that for LA Knight yet. So there's no reason to think that he is in danger from being overworked and having too many matches. Now on Nakamura's side, his last title was the IC title that he lost in February of 2022, and it's been 2.5 years plus since that title reign, so he certainly is due to get it back, I guess, but he's also lost 5 straight title matches since then. So is it going to be more of the same where last time when he came back, sure, he had some good feuds with Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes, but it was inevitable that he was going to lose. So is this just reheating the same thing yet again for Nakamura? It almost feels like it would totally kill this slightly new version of his character, which admittedly seems like a pretty cool character, if he were to just lose right now. Would that just be the end of it already? Could we ever take Shinsuke Nakamura seriously if he just loses flat out with a BFT in the middle of the ring? Whew. So yeah, we're kind of in a rock and a hard place here, where Knight really does not deserve to lose yet, and Nakamura really shouldn't lose in order to keep some heat to make his character worthwhile. So it seems like there's only 2 true solutions here. One is Knight can get a really lucky, sneaky win with some sort of roll-up after being dominated, and then after winning that way, Nakamura immediately regains his heat by totally destroying him inside the middle of the ring, and possibly with another mist. And secondly, the other alternative is, of course, Nakamura is just way too violent, way too mean, and he just gets himself disqualified, which I think is the main thing that we're probably going to see here. Either way, that is a win for LA Knight, so Knight will be our pick to win and our pick to bet. So those are our 3 title matches. Now let's switch on over to the 2 WarGames matches. And first, we will talk about the women's WarGames match. So spoiler-ish alert, because it wasn't officially announced on WWE TV yet. That makes it somewhat of a spoiler, but basically immediately right after Monday Night Raw on X, WWE announced that Bayley was indeed replacing Jade Cargill, which was very obvious because that's the way Raw ended. So there's no issues there. I mean, if the doc has seen it, then clearly it has already been known that this was happening. So the actual spoiler alert here is that there is a confrontation on Friday Night SmackDown, but no one's going to get the better of it because the WWE officials are going to be the ones to break up a brawl here. So there is no definitive winner going into the PLE, so we can't really glean anything out of that interaction that we haven't officially seen yet. Now, of course, the news is that Jade Cargill is injured, so she can't participate in this match. And unfortunately, it seems like it is a legitimate injury where it is expected that she will miss at least 3 months. So very unfortunate for her. We love seeing her and Bianca as a tag team. So immediately the question is, who injured Jade? And we already know that Nick Aldis asked Nia Jax about it and she said she didn't do it. So we don't really know much more than that. So the question remains, who injured Jade? Now, is that going to be a primary storyline during this match? I don't think during the match. I think WWE is going to kind of hold this one open for their own convenience, and it'll just kind of play out over time, really depending on when exactly Jade is able to come back. Once we really get a good timeline from that, I think that's when they'll finally reveal it. So I don't expect that anytime soon, actually. Because if she can get back in time for a full WrestleMania feud against Bianca, well, we just might find out that it is indeed Bianca who did it. Now, otherwise, if she's not able to return in time for WrestleMania, we'll probably go in a different direction and Bianca will probably find out who did it instead, and she will probably then just face off against that person. Now, on top of that, let's talk about our other storylines for all of these women here. So first, we'll talk about Io and Bayley. So this is a shoehorned issue now that wasn't supposed to happen. I want to reiterate, this was not supposed to happen. Bayley was not supposed to be in this match because this is a legitimate Jade injury. So again, Bayley and Io, they faced off at WrestleMania. They broke up Damage Control, so they should be at odds in this match. So I think we will have some tense moments between them, but because this was not supposed to happen, I don't think this will be an overwhelming storyline during this match. It is just a one-off occurrence as far as we know now. Io's gonna stay on Raw, Bayley's gonna stay on SmackDown. They're not gonna interact again, so I think we can get through this one match okay and not really have to deal with it too much. Now, Bayley and Naomi, sticking on the SmackDown side, they have both had their chances at the champion, Nia Jax, so I don't think that's going to be a top priority here. So let's flip on over to the Raw side quickly here. Io Sky, she is the #1 contender. Now, you might even forget that because that happened the very first episode after Crown Jewel, and really nothing has been going on with it. That's really the only actual reason for Io to be in this match, but they don't really talk about it or bring it up. So that is ice cold. So hopefully they can heat this up here a little bit and have Io and Liv have some good heated interactions during this match. And similarly, it looked like we were heading towards Raquel versus Rhea at Crown Jewel before Rhea was injured. So I think that's another thing that we have to reheat up here. So I think Rhea's gonna wanna get to Liv, but Raquel will do a pretty good job in stopping that. So Rhea will want to take out her aggression on Raquel coming out of this match instead. So we really should have Io going against Liv and Rhea going against Raquel by the time this match is over. But overall, it seems like the #1 storyline should actually be the Money in the Bank briefcase, with Tiffany Stratton failing to cash in at Crown Jewel, and it's kind of been an afterthought ever since, so that is a little weird. Now, there is one big issue with the briefcase this time around as well. Like I said, we have the Women's US title tournament going on, and there's no need for me to spoiler what's going to happen on tonight's episode, but next week's episode, based purely on the bracket, it's already been set for weeks. It is Naomi versus Tiffany Stratton versus Elektra Lopez. Yeah, we're not going to worry about Elektra here. It's nice she's actually going to be in a match. So the main focus here is Naomi versus Tiffany Stratton in that match. So, if Tiffany cashes in here, does that take her out of the Women's US title tournament? Because right now, the only person on the women's side on SmackDown that is not in the tournament is Nia Jax, and that's obviously because she's the champion. So if Tiffy's in this tournament, well, is she gonna go for both championships at once? Probably not. That would kind of be cool, but probably not. This is a brand new title. I don't think that's gonna happen. But I think they can work their way out of this. They can simply replace Tiffy with Nia in this tournament. That makes sense to me. That's an easy way to get out of it. I don't think that's a big deal, so I'm not gonna rule out the briefcase based solely on the tournament bracket. So to me, at the time, at Crown Jewel, it seemed like the perfect time for Tiffy to cash in because you had both champions there at the same time. And really, it seemed like that would be the only chance for that to happen. But lo and behold, the WWE did it again, and here we are with yet another chance for Tiffy to cash in on both of the champions here. Well, I guess not both of them. One of them, one or the other, either of them. I don't think she's gonna pin both of them at the same time. Nonetheless, this is now officially our last best chance to make this happen because there truly should be no interaction between both of these champions again after Survivor Series. So if I had to make a pick on a prop bet, I would tell you to bet yes that there will be a cash in. There are no prop bets this time around, but that is my pick. So how do we get to a cash in? Well, I give it 4 possibilities, I guess. First is during the match, Tiffy could obviously just bring the briefcase in as a weapon, and then, you know, she could just cash it in. There are refs in the ring once the match officially starts. So that could happen. And if you remember last year, Rhea actually ran down the ramp and brought out Damian Priest's briefcase to be cashed in. But that was thwarted when just seconds later, Randy Orton did finally return. A little late per usual, but he still returned. So that idea was scrapped for the time being. So likewise, I don't think that's gonna happen here. Now, secondly, after the match, there's obviously plenty of opportunities. So option 2 is for Liv and Raquel to attack Nia, or for Nia and Candice to attack Liv. So either of those could just happen. I don't rule either of those scenarios out, so very strong possibility there. The third option, at the end of the match, both champions are just laid out and injured. Maybe there's a double finisher with Bianca and Rhea both hitting their finishers on Liv and Nia, and so, well, perhaps Tiffy looks and sees both of them lying there, and she has to pick who she's cashing in on, and after a few seconds, well, she decides, and there we go. There's a new champion. It could have been either of them, so it's kind of cool that she had to make that pick at the moment. In our last option here, well, we could get some sort of weird triple threat where Tiffy cashes in and she goes maybe for Liv first, but Liv kicks out. So instead of just fighting Liv, she sees Nia also lying there, so she then tries to pin Nia and she also kicks out. And then all of a sudden, no one knows what to do, and it's just a triple threat match with all 3 of them? Boy, that would be crazy, right? Where Raquel is then helping out Liv, Candice is then helping out Nia, and Tiffy's in the middle trying to beat either of them. Boy, that's a really wild scenario. That would be a lot of fun. I'm not gonna bet on that, but I think that would be a really cool way to go here. So I see any of those 4 scenarios as a possibility. But before we get to a pick, I did say there was some history that I wanted to talk about. Now this is a little interesting wrinkle that I wasn't quite expecting. And that is in all of these WWE or NXT WarGames matches. Well, there are 4 possibilities for teams. Number 1 is that we have a good guy faction. Number 2 is that we have a bad guy faction. Number 3 is that we just have a group of super friends kind of randomly brought together. And number 4 is we have just kind of a randomly brought together group of super foes instead. So good guys over here, bad guys over here. It's either a faction or it's just a random group of folks. So in my calculations, when we have a random group of super friends on the good guy side, and then we have a bad guy faction as the primary. Now, they don't all have to be members of the faction. It's hard to get a 4 or 5 person faction all the time. But when we have primarily a bad guy faction, well, you would find it hard to believe probably. But on the women's side, good guy super friends are 3-0 against bad guy faction. On the men's side, good guy super friends are 3-0 against bad guy faction. Wow, didn't see that coming. random assortment of people, 6-0 against a faction on the bad guy side. Well, that's what we have in this match. Random assortment of super friends on the good guy side, and 2 factions on the bad guy side. Yeah, I mean, we have 2 people from the Judgment Day, and we have 3 people from Naya's Kingdom, if you want to call it that. I'm not going to call them a random assortment. I mean, Tiffy and Naya have been joined together for quite a while, and Candace has been together with her for, a little bit since before Crown Jewels. So, yeah, I think that's safe to call that a faction as well. So I'm going to put this in the same bank. And 6-0 is way more dominant than you would expect, but I guess it makes sense because the bad guy faction probably has been really bad to an assortment of good guys, or they have something that the good guys want to get, and the only way to get it is probably to join together to take it from the bad guys. So for story progression purposes, it seems like the good guys have to come together and take out this whole assortment of bad guys that could otherwise probably not be beaten. So is there any reason to think that's going to change here? Yeah, there are good reasons for that. I mean, these are 2 champions. It doesn't necessarily look good to have both of your champions lose this match. But again, at the same time, well, there's really nothing at stake in this match, right? I mean, if the bad guys win, the good guys are still going to come for the titles and come for the bad guys on both sides. Then you have to think about it. If we do have a Money in the Bank cash-in, the easiest way for that to happen is for the good guys to knock out the bad guys who are the title holders so that Miss Money in the Bank can swoop in there and then take the title. So in either scenario, it feels like it's just more likely for the good guys to win this one. So I get why the odds are close, and I think that's a right call by the books, but based on both history and based on me thinking this is the time for the Money in the Bank briefcase, I'm going to pick the good guys. They're my pick at -150. And that takes us to our main event with the OG Bloodline plus CM Punk at -250 for a 71.43% implied probability against the New Bloodline, and Big Bronson Reed at +170 for a 36.36% chance implied probability. So, spoiler alert here too, we did know that Jey Uso would be facing Jacob Fatu in the WarGames Advantage match on SmackDown, and the spoiler is that Jacob Fatu is going to win that match. And it sure looked like a clean win on some photo footage that we could see on YouTube. So it just looked like a nice mighty moonsault to win the match, and then both competitors just walked away up the ramp. So no interference, no one comes down, no one even goes to celebrate at the end. It looks like that's just the end of the show. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work. I know we do have CM Punk meeting with Reigns during the show, but that was not shown because it's not a match, so we don't really know what's going to happen there. So nonetheless, I think it's safe to say that it's just going to be a nice clean win, and that's all we get. So with that said, does that really matter for us? No, it doesn't. I mean, there's not a brawl at the end. It's going to make sure we get that final look to see who is looking strong so that we can pick the other way. So that's really the only thing that we could take away from it, and it's not there to take away. So let's just move along. So I have to admit, here is my own personal warning to you. I am 0-2 so far in this Roman Reigns feud, as I picked Reigns to lose the first match with Cody Rhodes, and then I picked him to win the last match with the Usos. Both of those were wrong. But at the end of the day, that means Reigns is indeed 1-1 against the New Bloodline, so we're exactly where we're supposed to be in a 3-match series. Now, why is this a 3-match series? I guess it's just a 3-match tag series instead of a 3-match one-on-one series. So the first one was a regular tag, the second one was a 6-man tag, and now here we are in a WarGames match. It's just a 5-on-5 tornado tag, so that's really all there is to it. So again, if conventional booking holds, the good guys win the third one and win the series. And if we just simply go back to storyline progression that we talked about, the simple thing here is that Roman Reigns wins the series so that now he can finally start focusing, going one-on-one towards the ultimate goal, which for now is indeed the fight over the Ulafala. So let's talk about what could happen here, because there are a lot of possibilities. Let's start with the new bloodline, and if they win, well, nothing changes, right? Because if the new bloodline just straight up wins the match, then Roman Reigns isn't going to go away. Nothing's changing there. Roman Reigns is still going to show up on the next SmackDown unless he's hospitalized, which could happen since he only shows up sometimes when he feels like it. But assuming that that doesn't happen, he shows up to the next SmackDown and he shows up to try to get that Ulafala yet again. Nothing changes. All right, so that wouldn't be any good. So we can't just have that. I mean, no. That's not going to happen. But of course, the new bloodline could win with any other sort of scenario, any kind of sort of distraction, shenanigans, people coming back and returning. And so why don't we just talk about some of those possibilities? Let's do the most remote one, which would be the most basic. Seth Rollins is still mad at Big Bronson Reed. He's recovered. He somehow gets into the cage. He does a stomp off the top of the cage onto Reed's head, and then the OG bloodline gets a pin. Okay, sure, but it would look cool, but I don't think anyone cares that much about that for that to be the final result. So that would be a bummer. Also means Rollins would, at the end of the day, still have helped out Roman Reigns, which feels like what we were trying to avoid by him saying no for multiple weeks. So no, let's just move on from that one. The big one, of course, is the great one, The Rock, your final boss, coming back because apparently Moana 2 is now out, so he's done promoting that. The live-action Moana apparently just wrapped up filming this past week, so he should have a wide open schedule to show up if he so chooses to show up. Well, that does make things interesting, so well, why don't we talk about that for a minute? Is The Rock gonna show up and get physical in this match? Nah, come on, he's the final boss. He's not just gonna show up, get in that cage and lay the SmackDown. I don't see that happening at all. So if he just signals the new bloodline to do something, I don't know what that would be during the match. They're already fighting the OG bloodline, so that doesn't make sense. But the one thing that does make sense to me is, of course, he signals for a betrayal of some sort, kind of like what he did at Bad Blood, where he just came out and gave that one hand signal. This time he's got some new gesture in his tricks, and that will get somebody going, kind of like Order 66 in Star Wars, because you have to have a good Star Wars reference here. Because Emperor Palpatine is going to order the troops, and when he does, the light switch is going to go on, and Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, Sami Zayn, and maybe even CM Punk, any of them could be activated at that point, and it would really be something if we saw a double super kick followed by a haluva kick, and then maybe even a GTS if we want to, and that could be crazy enough, and Reigns could get pinned, and the new bloodline would obviously get a pin by Sikoa, and that would make things pretty interesting. I have to admit, that would be pretty good. I have to admit that'd be pretty good. But is The Rock really going to show up here? I don't know. I have a feeling he doesn't really want to get compared to CM Punk's big return last year when that just blew the roof off the place. The Rock returning, always a big deal. Let's get that straight, of course, but if he has to compare his return to CM Punk's return from last year, I think he would lose that. So there's a pretty good chance he's not going to show up, if for no other reason than that, and we can delay his return for just a little bit. Maybe, the premiere of Raw on Netflix. So, of course, there are other non-Rock betrayals. We could obviously have Sami Zayn and Jey Uso work together to betray the OG bloodline and take out Jimmy and Roman, because obviously they deserve it by what they did over the past couple of years. So it just makes sense that they joined up together for this sole purpose to begin with. That would also give Roman a reason to show up on that first Netflix episode of Monday Night Raw, which Reigns has already confirmed he will be appearing on that show. Of course, we could have the Usos doing it together, just a straight up double kick to Roman's dome. That would be fun, but it is a little harder to see Jimmy doing that without The Rock getting involved, because obviously the last we saw, it was Sikoa and the New Bloodline taking out Jimmy for a whole bunch of months, and then Jimmy returned to team with Roman. So it's a little more convoluted that way, so I don't think we'll see that without The Rock being involved. And of course, the most likely scenario of them all is Paul Heyman and CM Punk, of course, teaming up together to take out Roman Reigns. And certainly all of the clues are there for that to happen. First, of course, he didn't answer the phone, had his phone disconnected. And of course, when he showed up last week, he was wearing a suit that looked an awful lot like the one that Solo Sikoa was wearing when Sikoa took out Heyman. Now, that could be because maybe that is the preferred suit of The Rock, who is bringing down the commands from above, and maybe even Heyman is under The Rock's control at this point. And then even more interestingly, at the end of last week's SmackDown, what we didn't see on air was that Heyman embraced Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, and Sami Zayn, but he did not do that with Roman Reigns at the end. Because obviously Reigns, as we saw in the ring, knew nothing of Heyman or Punk returning and was willing to go 4-on-5 against the New Bloodline. And then at the end of the show, he was asking why Punk was there, and sure enough, he did not interact with the Wise Man. So the one scenario that I cannot get out of my head happening on this WarGames match is that Roman Reigns and CM Punk are standing side by side together, looking at Solo Sikoa, who is pleading for his life for those two not to take him down at the very end of this match. And just when it looks like it's over for Solo, well, CM Punk turns on Reigns, attacks him, lands that GTS, and puts out his hand for Sikoa to get the easy pin and the win. And then Punk and Heyman just walk off by themselves up the ramp and backstage, laughing the entire way. It almost feels too good and too obvious for that to happen if The Rock's not coming back. So, man, I really feel like there's a good chance of that happening. But at the end of the day, we have to talk about storyline progression yet again, and we need to get to a finish line, whatever that finish line may be. Is it getting the Ulafala off of Solo Sikoa? Or maybe is it even that one-on-one match against The Rock at WrestleMania? You know, my prediction was for Sikoa to be that final match at WrestleMania for the Ulafala, but I could be wrong on that one. But either way, Reigns is not going to have that many more matches. We never really know how many matches that man's going to have, but I can't see it being more than 4. So we've got to get to the finish line in a limited amount of time. So the most straightforward thing, of course, is that Reigns and the OG Bloodline win, and now Reigns, because he's won, he gets to go right back in a straight line against the New Bloodline. But Solo's obviously not just going to agree to a match. He's at least going to make him go through the minions first, so maybe we get 4 matches, one at either main event or on that premiere on Netflix. Then, of course, at the Royal Rumble, and then maybe at the Elimination Chamber, and ending it with that match at WrestleMania. That could get us a one-on-one match against all the members of the New Bloodline, but that does feel a little bit out of sorts. I don't think he needs to go through Tama Tonga and Tongaloa. It is more likely that it'll just be Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa. So I don't know exactly about that, but what we do know is that Reigns will have limited matches inside that ring. And of course, anything I said earlier about those betrayals, those could happen after the match too. We could get Reigns with a win to set him on that right path, but the New Bloodline and any of his team members could turn on him after the match is over, and The Rock can show up after the match is over, so you still get that Roman Reigns win, and then you still get that betrayal to send Reigns on those side quests so that he might have to first take on CM Punk or the other OG Bloodline members before getting back on track to take on Fatu and Sikoa. So no matter how you slice it, there are a lot of options here that the WWE has to choose from. And yet, at the end of the day, this is match 3 of a 3-match series, and to keep Roman Reigns on the right path, unfortunately, I think I've got to pick him to win here. So I don't like it, but Roman Reigns plus the rest of the OG Bloodline and CM Punk, I'm going to take at minus 250 for the win and for the bet. But I really don't like it because that gives me all favorites as the pick, and that I feel is never a great idea. I just don't see enough value in going with the new Bloodline as an underdog to take it here. And that's the same for really any match on the card. No one is that big of an underdog to take to bet, but not to actually pick to win. So for today, in our very quick recap, it is all of the favorites, as we've got Gunther, we've got Braun Breaker, we've got LA Knight, we've got the Super Friends Good Guy team in the women's WarGames match, and we'll go with the good guys again with the OG Bloodline and CM Punk in the men's WarGames match. As always, don't bet any more than you are able to afford to lose, but please, no matter what, just enjoy Survivor Series WarGames. And if you haven't gotten enough WarGames discussions over these last few weeks, the Doc and I have talked about it plenty right on over here on the OK Not OK podcast. And so be sure to check that out. I'm the SportsZu, and this has been the OK Not OK podcast.